Welcome to the Somewhat Creative Show, the podcast where we explore the ideas, tools, and stories that are shaping the creative industry. I'm Clark Miller, here with Rocky Tilney as always, and today we're talking about visual storytelling. There he is. How great imagery and unique designs can be so much more than window dressing. They can tell a story. And speaking of stories, later on in the show, we're going to be joined by the one and only in-house photographer at Sunset Magazine, photographer extraordinaire, Thomas J. Story. You see what I did there? A seasoned pro who's spent over 2 decades shooting homes, gardens, travel, people, and food. He'll share what it takes to build trust on set, capture beauty in unpredictable places, and collaborate with creatives to bring stories to life. Let's get into it. Rocky, how are you?
Let's get into it. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm tired. I got woken up about 4 times by the little tyrant that runs our house. She did not want to sleep last night. So I'm running on fumes.
I didn't want to sleep last night either. I was in bed, laying there forever, not able to fall asleep. And I did the one thing that you're not supposed to do. I grabbed my phone.
A little scrolling.
And then
Yep.
like an hour went by. It was like 1 o'clock. And I was like, what have I done? I'm not even tired now.
So I did the same thing. And then
It's a mistake.
at 2 a.m. was woken up by a tiny drill sergeant that's 3 years old and lives in our house. So that was not fun. And then several times after that, I'm with you. I'm a little tired.
It's going to be an interesting episode. We're both sleep deprived.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have to talk about visual design and where it's going.
Yeah.
There's so much.
And telling a story. I mean, I love this topic because it's what I've always said about, all the things that we do. It's like you're trying to tell a story to an audience.
Well, storytelling is really what is sort of the linchpin to everything that we do, all creative pursuits. The whole idea is to tell a story, whether it's like music or visual design or dance or every form of creativity. There's like this storytelling foundation to it. And we're seeing it shift, obviously, for a variety of reasons. And every week it's like a different sort of eye-opening sort of thing we're seeing in the news with visual design. And so I'm focusing a ton on that right now because I'm trying to get a grasp for like where does visual design and storytelling play a role in like studios and agencies going forward? How critical is that? And what, are those skills able to be either replaced or augmented with today's technology?
Yeah. And how much of that is going to be replaced? How much are we going to replace the traditional storytellers of our industry, the creatives, the photographers, the illustrators, the artists, the writers? Mm-hmm. How much of that is going to be replaced and how much are we going to hang on to? And, how much of it is going to transform over the next, I was going to say a decade, but like, let's be honest, 5 minutes from now, it's all going to change. So it's hard to tell where it's going.
Right.
But I think at the core of all of it is still going to be this kind of storytelling. I don't think there'll ever be a time when AI really can understand the story you're trying to tell. Like, I think you'll always have to tell it like, this is the story I want to tell. So I don't think that's going away.
It's true. And I think there's still, with storytelling, it has to have a human aspect, a human connection to it. Mm-hmm. It's not something that I think you can have synthetic versions of out there.
Yeah.
Or that will resonate. I don't think they'll resonate.
That will resonate and be different.
Yeah.
Differentiation, I think, is the name of the game. And I think it's the one area where I would say you can get differentiation if you prompt correctly, in the world of AI, but it also is drawing on a training data that is the stuff that's been done over and over and over, right? It's the more stuff out there like it, the more it's going to be trained on it and the more it's going to see that and want to just reproduce that. Right. So I think in this age of AI reproduction, it's about finding those differentiators and tapping into them and being subversive and being outside of the box. And I think that's a skill that humans have that AI maybe still is like, if you ask it to do your entire marketing campaign or something, it's like, it's going to give you those obvious, I find this in my work all the time where I'm lazy and sometimes a piece will come across my desk and it's the challenge with my job is I have to tell these stories visually that are very rooted in financial data, very rooted in just like a company that is shifting their market focus from open source to like, cloud database. It's,
Mhm.
how do you tell that in an original, like visually, what is that?
Right.
So I will a lot of times rely on throwing something into ChatGPT and saying, hey, can you give me some ideas for like an article that would be about this kind of subject matter? And you most of the time get the same sort of results. You get how about a chessboard where the pieces are made of code and they move
Mhm.
around? How about a puzzle piece and the last piece is missing? And it's like, it all becomes that very stocky kind of ideas that are just out there a million times. And that's why it's giving them to you, because it's like, well, these are the most common ideas for this type of storytelling. And so I think that's where, a great storyteller, somebody that can think outside of the box, and I try to, it's not always, you know, doesn't always work, but I
Yeah,
try to.
I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about how when we were on vacation last year in Italy, we were going through all these museums. We went through um, different museums where we were looking at different styles and different periods of art. And you go and you look at like the medieval style, Christian art. It's all very flat, two dimensional. The proportions are all a little bit wonky, like kind of
Hmm.
off, you know. But that style, like, persisted for, centuries, right?
Hmm.
Until the Renaissance, when you start to see depth of a depth or perspectives or things, like, mathematically are, like, correct in the scene, and then you get
Hmm.
these really rich sort of shadows and things like that, and it was like it all sort of changed, and then it's like you see more artists starting to do those styles, and so I was thinking, well, isn't every like, unless you pinpoint the artist that did it first, that style first, like, isn't it all sort of derivative works at that point? Like adopting, "Oh, I like how this artist did shadows and lighting. We're gonna use that in our art," and then kinda take it forward from there, and then it's always changing and adapting and evolving, and then you get into, like, more modern stuff where you have surrealism and, I can't even think of all the different styles of art right now, but you know what I mean, like, so there's these styles change over time, and they all become a derivative
Finger
of someone
painting. I
else's
think finger
work.
painting is one of them, Rocky.
Cave painting, if we wanna go back
Cave
to
painting. Sure. Go all the way back.
France, yeah. So I guess the question, the long
Hmm.
way around I'm getting to this question is, uh, is AI sort of derivative of all the human artwork that we've done through the years? It's just learning from that. It's
And if
not
so, is
inventing
that
anything, yeah.
if is that any different than we've always done? I think we kind of touched on this in the last show. I kind of feel like it's not doing anything that humans haven't ever done. We all
Mhm,
draw inspiration and we all like, our source data, our training data is just in our heads rather than like out there. We pick it up out in the world and we put it in our heads and then it filters back through us. So is it any different than what we've always done? Or we're training ourselves on the art that we've seen, just
mhm.
like those medieval painters, Renaissance painters, medieval times painters. Those are the painters at the actual medieval times, not the people from that century. They do great work and great chicken wings. But no, I think it's like, it's true. It's like everything's been done. So you just, and I think the trick, and this is what I kind of fall back on in my own kind of practice and in my work, is you try and take one of those things that's been done and how do you put a little twist on it? I was doing
Mhm.
some marketing materials for our campaign we're working on for social media, and like it's about one of our newsletters is about like how AI is being applied. It's called Applied AI, and it's about how it's being applied in the real world, how businesses are actually using it. And a lot of times you would do a robot face or hand or something, and it's like how do you break out of that mold with, but still like the robot or the neural network has become the symbol of this industry. So how do you still tie back into that? And one of the ideas I had that I really liked was a robot but carrying like a modern briefcase, and it
Mhm.
and it has this juxtaposition of like, why would a robot carry a briefcase, but it tied in the business world and like this real world kind of AI that told that story in a really kind of interesting way. And it wasn't an idea like, it's not an idea that I think AI would have thought of, because it's combining two ideas, like this businessman with a briefcase and this robot that's like high tech and AI. So I think that's where our creativity still plays a big part in that storytelling, is like taking those disparate ideas and bringing them into one cohesive element to tell a story.
Right.
I
And I
think.
think that's the sort of human ingenuity aspect that I don't think it's AI solves those kind of, like you said, disparate ideas and kind of bring them together because they might feel like they're abstract. Humans think abstractly. That we are able to do that, and so I think we're always going to have a little bit of an edge when it comes to like creating ideas like that or generating ideas.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've found interesting too recently is thinking about ideas, and it's one of the things that studios and agencies have always sort of had pride in what they could come up with, what sort of ideas they could generate. It's always a hard thing to sell though. Like as an agency or studio, if you're saying we have the best ideas, it's like, well, that's hard to prove. How do
Hmm.
you
It's all
sort of
subjective, right? Yeah.
yeah, how do you quantify that? And you really can't. It's really about the interactions and relationships we have with people and the ability to sell ideas. We talked about that a couple episodes ago about, what it takes to sell ideas and that they're not really worth, their weight until they're sold. And we're seeing now, like, this ability to generate ideas really quickly, but still the execution is where the real power and value is for
Hmm.
ideas. How do you execute on those ideas? And I think we're gonna see a shift in kind of this agency studio model with that. You can't really rely on ideas anymore. And oftentimes now, and I'm seeing this within the last 6 months, this has been a lot more prevalent. We're having clients actually send ideas that they generated an AI and
Yeah.
asking us to produce, and I feel like that's going to be a problem
Hmm.
because what's missing there is the creative person or the people in the creative studios and agencies, they're not having the conversations about the why. So why are we creating this? So there's gonna be a gap, I think, with just people wanting to move quickly and generate things and have that kind of inertia with
Hmm.
with producing, but we're not slowing down to really think about, well, why should we do this or why is this a good idea? And I'm a little bit concerned about that, and I'm not sure how to navigate that with clients yet.
Well, especially because things have sped up so much too. There's no time to sit with ideas and to kind of take that time.
Mhm,
Everything's getting faster and faster. It's, I think back to the times of actual, you know, work done by hand in the art department that was people had to cut things out and like let things dry. And
mhm,
there's so many opportunities to sit back and like think about what you're doing that are kind of going away.
mhm.
The speed that we're working at now, the iteration that you can produce with the new tools is just, it's taking away some of that time. The only time I get now is that just waiting for that AI to generate something, that couple minutes of it. Well, it's still kind of blurry, and I'm just like, no, this
Yeah.
is my time to think about things, and then it's done. But I do agree. I think I've gotten that from a few editors and reporters have definitely been sending me things they've produced in ChatGPT. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, we could do this, but is it the best way to tell this story? I don't know. It's
Yeah, I wind up having more questions than answers when I do get requests that come from a client and they're already producing ideas through through AI. Then it brings me to the question like, well, why is this included? Is this supposed to be included in this? So we have to have the conversation anyway. We might as well have the conversation first because people are anxious and they just want to get things done. And they
Mhm.
don't want to put the time and effort into actually thinking it through and strategizing and planning before they hit that prompt.
Yeah. And you have to go all the way back to the roots of it, right? You have to take things all the way down to, especially when you're doing branding work or any kind of storytelling. Like, I always think about the first time I heard about like color theory and like why
Mhm,
all the fast food chains use red and yellow. And it's like,
mhm,
because human psychology says that those colors elicit like a energetic response and makes you feel hungry because it's doing something in your brain that's activating those parts of your brain. I don't know. I can't remember
yeah,
exactly why. It's the fire of cooking meat and everything. It's the reds and yellows and oranges, something like that.
yeah,
But going all the way back to that point and saying like, what do we want our brand? What do we want this piece of art, this graphic, this photo, like any of it, what do we want it to kind of, what's the story we want it to tell, and what do we want people to feel when they look at it? And I think that's an important part of that, like taking a step back, really deeply thinking about these things, and not just going with that first idea that ChatGPT spits out.
Right, right. Well, this is going to be an interesting, I think, next 6 months to a year. And it's actually a great segue into our guest segment where we could actually ask Tom's story. How is he using photography in pushing kind of these, creative narratives from a
Mhm.
visual standpoint? And how's he navigating AI and generative AI with clients?
Yeah. And maybe we'll talk to him about not AI and actually doing creative,
Imagine
which will
that.
be I know it'll be a nice change of pace. It's like AI all the time, every freaking show. We're excited to welcome Thomas Jehoshaphat's story to the show. Tom's an editorial and commercial shooter celebrating 25 years at Sunset Magazine. If you've seen a Sunset Magazine cover you have loved in the past 25 years, it's more than likely one of his. An illustrious career capturing homes, gardens, people, and places for not only Sunset, but some of the best lifestyle publications in the country. We've worked with him firsthand and know how sharp his eye is, not just for the frame, but for the whole story behind it. You see what we did there, Tom? We worked on a little
Wow, I need you to
story
work
action
on my
into it.
website and do my bio there.
This is
That's
almost
awesome.
all
Thank
Rocky,
you.
by the way. I'm
How
just
much did
reading.
you, yeah, how much
Thank you.
did you pay for that glaze there, Tom?
That's it. You're
There
hired.
you go. I think the first most important question is, what does the J stand for? Can we get that on record?
Definitely not Jehoshaphat, but pretty close. It's Joseph. So
I was
that's,
close. I
yeah,
think
Very
I've asked you
close.
pretty
that.
close.
I think I've
My
asked you that.
grandfather on my mom's side, who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and survived
Good.
all three.
It's a good legacy. And
I mean, apparently he would have to survive the first two to get to the third one, but yes.
That's a
this is true.
good,
This is true.
technicality, right?
How are you, Tom?
Good. I've been up in the Bay Area this week photographing. I'm pretty wiped out today. Can't lie. These
You?
long shoot days get harder the older you get.
Yeah, I think you're going to match our energy perfectly then, because we were just talking about how exhausted we are from the week and sleepless nights. So we're
Yeah,
all we're
yeah.
all right in that
We're
vein.
faking it right now.
Yeah.
I'm completely
You
on a
reach.
chemical energy right here with caffeine.
Yeah, I'm there too. I'm using my Happy Father's Day cup from my wife from 2016, and just realizing how far away 20 in 2025.
Can I ask you something, Tom? What are your thoughts on spouses giving each other gifts for the Father's Day, Mother's Day days?
Oh, that's a really good question and timely.
Yeah,
It is.
she's not my mother. I'm not her
That's
father.
how I feel.
And I'm like, kids, you're on your own. Like, if
We
you
are
need
we are
some
gonna get in
help,
trouble for this one.
Yeah. Well,
ask your mom. But yeah,
I don't have very tiny legs to stand on, figuratively and literally, because
right.
my kids can't really go out and buy something for their mom at this age. But I still kind of am
Yeah, but
like,
you can
why
help
am I
them make
getting? I
cards. You
know I
can,
should.
yeah.
I should. It's just it
You
doesn't
know
come into
what?
mind.
Okay, so let's step back a little bit. I think when the kids are closer to your kids' ages,
Then it's on
then
you.
it is
Yeah,
appropriate
Okay.
to
absolutely.
help.
All right.
Yes,
Good tip.
for sure. But when they're 18 and 16 years old, I'm sorry, if they haven't figured it out by now, then
Yeah.
way to disappoint your parents, kids.
I get that. Well, Tom, congratulations. If I haven't said it yet, congratulations on 25 years at Sunset Magazine. That's incredible. I think
Yeah, thank you.
being a part of anything for that long is something to celebrate. I just that's extremely impressive. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a great ride. I mean, and I was just talking to one of the old photo editors at Sunset, Jeffrey Cross, who's also a photographer, and we were just talking about how much things have changed
Mm,
in the photography world, because we were just looking at the type of equipment that we used to use in,
Mm,
the early 2000s, and just how little you kind of can get away with nowadays,
mm,
just because
yeah,
they're making everything smaller, better, faster.
yeah,
But yeah, it's going from, the film days when I started at Sunset and traveling with coolers full of film and Polaroid and four by
man.
fives and big speedotrons and 10 cases to go photograph an idea house through the airport. I definitely, when I hit into my 40s and mirrorless cameras started coming onto the market, and all of a sudden everything was getting smaller and lighter, and I could throw, 2 or 3 camera bodies and 5 lenses in a backpack that was like a quarter of the weight of my old one. That was
Yeah.
with the same, if not better quality.
Incredible.
There's
Yeah.
progress. So yeah, so things have definitely changed in
Yeah.
25 years, and it feels like now we're on this cusp of a new change in photography and image making, which has a lot of people freaked out.
Yeah,
How are
we certainly are.
how are you navigating that, Tom? It's one of the things that comes up in every conversation Clark and I have, and we even if we try not to talk about it or even have it as a note to talk about, it
Yeah.
comes up
Mm-hmm.
because something new happened that week and we're like, "Oh damn, that's crazy," or "That's so different,"
Yeah.
or "Wow, you could do a film with
Mhm.
prompts."
It's kind of crazy. I have to say I am actually embracing it. The one downside is that I don't have to call Clark here every other week freaked out about how to do something in Photoshop. It is kind of amazing. Like
It is a
for me
downside.
as a photographer, the generative exactly, the generative fill in Photoshop for a photographer, it's just something that you could have done 5 years ago,
Mhm.
3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, that would have taken you a half an hour or an hour is now 30 seconds. I mean, that's
I used it this
kind of great.
morning. I had a headshot, executive headshot, where it was really tight and their shoulder was cut off,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of them are like
Yep.
that. And I needed to pull it out. I had to add a shoulder. It had to match the texture of the suit,
Yeah.
and it worked.
I used
It's
to be
crazy.
the guy that you'd come to when there was
Right.
something that needed to be photoshopped out or
Yeah.
replaced or added to a scene. And now it's like, well, I don't matter. I'm just here to generate prompts.
I mean, that said, I gotta say, some of the stuff that I've seen you do, Clark, having embraced that early on, I tried to do some of the same things and it was ridiculous, like how bad
Well,
it is. So I think there's, the flip side of it is
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's easy if you kind of like already know some basics of design or,
Well, I think
well,
graphics.
there's
and
a
I think it's
difference too. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's true of photography too. It's like, there's things you can get it to do and to produce if you have that knowledge. Like, I think my background in the years that I've spent learning Photoshop and all these design programs has, accelerated the pace at which I can create things with these AI tools that maybe if you were just coming to it fresh without that background, like, you couldn't do. And I think the same is true of creating a beautiful photograph or something in one of these programs. It's like, without knowing f-stops and camera angles and, you know
Uh-huh.
same with the animations and the movie producing stuff that's going on. It's like, I think the people that are most successful have that background knowledge. And and I also wonder, like, speaking of you coming from the film world into digital, are we, going to get to a point where no one has that background knowledge? Like, I was lucky enough to I started with digital photography early on in my career, and then took a step back and, like, learned film and processing and darkroom techniques and everything. And that only helped kind of guide how I produce things in Photoshop, because you have a lot of the same tools that you used to use in the
Sure.
darkroom. So I think it's like, are we going to lose something by people not having that knowledge base that they've built doing it themselves, that now we're just going to come along and never have done that and just start working with the prompting? And I don't know, maybe they'll
Well,
study
yeah,
it.
for
I don't
sure.
know.
I definitely feel very lucky that I started my career in the film world where you're paying attention. You really had to pay attention to color balance, especially, and paying attention to color, exposure, all that good stuff. Of course, composition hasn't really changed, but because you couldn't very easily correct it in post. Nowadays, you just, everyone sets everything to auto, white balance, auto exposure, and you point the picture and, point the camera and press a button and you're done for the most part. And I think being able to pay attention to like how colors are working, for me, that was really helpful. Do I want to go back to working like that? Not necessarily. I mean,
What
there was
harder?
definitely something nice about the pace of slowing down. I mean, I think when we would do a home shoot, for Sunset in the early 2000s shooting film, we would do maybe 5 or 6 shots a day.
Hmm.
Now it's
10,
sky's the limit.
12,
30,
15.
40.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just details, vignettes, overalls. Then everyone wants a reel, so you got to walk around with your gimbal and shoot video. And
Yeah.
uh,
Well, it's funny. It's something me and Rocky were just talking about actually is like, how do you get back to that point of like, taking a breath and being able to think about, in this instance, like a shot, like if you're moving at such quick speed, because the new tools have made everything easier and faster, but we're now getting to a point where we're trying to jam more into our day and more into our process. And it's not leaving that
yeah,
opportunity to sit and like, is there another way to like, is this the best angle? Is this the right, is this the right thing to do?
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that is a trap that you get sucked into, especially from clients who are very well aware of how many images you can get done in a day, and they're paying you, so they want to get as many as they can, which, you don't blame them. That said, I think, a conversation beforehand when I shoot any freelance work I do is mainly for architects, and they'll generally come with floor plans marked up of angles that they want because they're trying to match, some AI generated before shots or whatever that, their
Mhm.
renderings. So that's helpful to, sort of slow down a little bit. The problem is, yes, you're moving faster, you're getting more done on the front end, but now all of a sudden, I've got about 30 or 40 hours of editing to do after this week. And so it's like, I really miss, I would do a shoot for sunset. I would have my rolls of film picked up by a lab at the end of the day. They would bring it back to San Francisco, process it, bring the film back the next morning. I would cut them up, put them in a sleeve, use my little acetate marker,
Mhm.
mark which ones I wanted to turn in, write my name on it, the story name, hand it to the photo editor, and I was done. That was it. I was done. And yeah,
Mm.
that's kind of nice. So definitely the trade-off for getting, shooting more on the front end is how much time you're going to spend on the back end.
Yeah.
And I think I'm sure there are a lot of things that you guys do that are either not billed or, not budgeted for that require a lot of time.
Yeah. Well,
So that's kind of what I get sucked into sometimes, of like not sort of letting people know, look, this is, it's
well,
just more time on the back end.
I can imagine too. Then the new tools and removing things in a photograph have been a welcome tool in your toolkit when you're an in-house photographer and you can't bill for extra time spent editing and that sort of thing.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, things I just think back to, shooting, if there was like an exit sign in a shot back in the day, it was like taking a piece of white foam core, cutting it to the size of the exit sign, taping it up so where you're at least like hiding it. Now it's, 30
2
seconds
seconds.
to
Yeah.
remove it. Like, yeah, 2 seconds.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we were talking
So
earlier
yeah,
about just the sheer volume of ideas now that, and as a design agency and when you're working on brands and stuff like that, like typically how it would work is you'd come up with a bunch of like, say, logo ideas, or you're working on a new brand. You'd maybe do 5 to 7 ideas, and it sounds like photography is probably experiencing the same thing where you're expected to do more now because you have the tools to generate more ideas faster and cheaper. So yeah, you may be going through 200 shots from a shoot, and then on the design side, we're maybe going through 15 ideas that maybe the client sent some in too. Hey, here's a
yeah,
bunch we submitted, and it's like,
Hmm.
and part of our conversation earlier was like, usually those conversations happened at the front of the project where we go over strategy and ideation about what something is, rather than, oh, here's a bunch of stuff, see if this works, and then so you have to go through that, and there's more time associated with that now, and it's because ideas are so cheap.
yeah, yeah. I find that one thing that I've had to do being the photographer at Sunset for 25 years is work fast, sort of like think on my feet, because if I don't generally have the luxury if I'm being sent to, shoot a national park story. I'm not, I don't get to be Ansel Adams and stay in one location for 2 weeks and wait
Mhm.
for the light to be just like amazing. So I think
Hmm.
for me over the years, I've had to just sort of like very quickly suss out the situation, know that, we need early morning light on here. We need late afternoon on here. Okay. We're shooting restaurant interiors in the middle of the day. We're shooting some portraits. There's always something you can do in the middle of the day. But having, to move on to the next shoot the next day, it's like you have to make it work. So I think it's sort of like I've had to learn how to work fast anyway. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that there's, you're doing more, but yes, I do think there is a danger of things getting watered down where it's just like, I mean, you look at the content that's out right now just on Instagram or in Reels, and it's just how much every day, more and more and more and more. And it's like this snowball effect of like, when is too much enough?
True. I mean, and I think, you're able to work at that speed, having that 25 years of experience. Like, I don't know if would a photographer coming up now be able to produce the quality and the understand the light, like make those quick decisions without that time. Could they work at that same pace?
Yeah, I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure I mean, it's kind of amazing. My nephew and his band were just staying here in the loft. They're all in their mid 20s. They're touring the West Coast. They drove up, started in Long Beach. They're a punk rock band,
Mhm.
really great bounce house. But they drove up to Emeryville. They stayed here. They played a show in San Francisco at the Kilowatt. Spent the day in San Francisco having fun the next day. This morning they woke up at 4:30, got on the road at 5 to drive up to Portland. They're playing a show tonight in Portland. Then they're getting up, driving to Seattle, playing in Seattle, and then driving all the way back down to Emeryville the next day. So, and they're, so they have that energy of like they want to be creative. They're, finding venues that they can play at, and they're just doing the tours. So I think there is that creative energy in the younger crowd now. At least I'm seeing, in the music scene for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Photography, yeah, I think it comes down to, I think a lot of it just from, being a little bit older, as Clark likes to remind me every now and then. It's just having, just the experience of making sort of quick personal relationships with people while you're traveling, or while you're meeting someone for the first time to do a portrait. Just like, how do you engage with them to make them as comfortable as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
because you don't have all day, you don't know them, so
Hmm.
I think that experience has really helped me over the years, that I absolutely know I did not have when I started at Sunset at 29 years old.
Hmm.
Sure. 85 years ago. It's
Exactly.
insane. That's crazy.
That's rough.
Well,
Magazine's only been around 127 years, so
he's been there since the start, everybody. He's
Yeah.
he's Mr.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, let's get into some of your career stories, if you will. I would love to hear, like, I don't know, what was the hardest shoot you've ever had? What was the most memorable shoot you've ever had? I mean, take your pick of it. Like, there's a million questions we could ask, but what kind of stands
Yeah.
out in your mind from 25 years?
God, there's so many. A national park road trip that back in the days when there were budgets for assistance and I could have someone come with me, and someone I actually enjoyed spending time with. We went and did, was it Highway 89 out in the Southwest, and we just did all these national parks, and just getting up every day knowing that you're going somewhere amazing yet again. Just everything just kind of flowed. That said, keeping track of SD cards,
Mm,
backing everything up, making sure you haven't left anything behind. It's, that was one of those trips where it was like, okay, you get one chance to do this. And I think, the preparation and just making sure that you're keeping track of everything,
mhm.
is becoming more and more important for me. But yeah, the national parks. I did the Canadian Rockies. I went and photographed a flower farm up in Alaska in the summer. And let me tell you, when you're waiting for the light to go down to shoot, late afternoon, nice
Midnight.
light, it's like 11 p.m. and it's
Yeah.
like you're ready for bed, and it's like, well, the lights, it just starts going down, and then a few hours later it starts coming back
Yeah.
up. So,
That's
learning
why
how to pace yourself.
that's why I got out of the photo game. I'm not getting up at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning to get that light. It's too early for me.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a morning person, and have, learned to be like, I just have to be sometimes, because if you're not there, it's one thing, oh, sunsets or sunrises at, 6:30. Well, if you're not there by 5:30, you're too late. I mean, you have to be at a location. So there, I remember some trips, like that trip where my assistant and I, Eddie, would pull into a hotel at like 11:30 midnight, from one location, driving, 4 or 5 hours, and then having to wake up at 4:30 the next morning to get back on the road to get to the next location for sunrise. So, those can be a little brutal after a while, but we also did this amazing trip, Highway 1, where we started all the way down Southern California and went all the way up. I mean, California's, if you don't realize, is a really big state. And it takes a lot to drive up and down the coast fully. But yeah, I think just getting to see these places and, record them for history and sort of interpret, what the writers have experienced. I mean, they're back in the early days, the writer would go out first, do the whole trip, and then come back, write the story up, and then send the photographer, which
Give you the
was
locations to
kind of
hit.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of knew exactly. Then at some point, we sort of would do two things at once. Photographer and writer would go at the same time. And now, I think a lot of it is just, they'll look things up and you just go there. So I think, trying to make sure that you're still in touch with, the person telling the story. Like, I'm interpreting their story, but there is a writer behind these stories who, I mean, sometimes it's nice to read the words too. These people have, done amazing trips also that I get to photograph, but they got to experience. And I want to make sure that I'm, being respectful and doing as good a job as I can with these things. Cause
Absolutely.
like they say, you're only as good as your last job, right? Like, you're only as good as the last piece of work you put out. Like,
God, I hope
it's
that's
what
not
people
true.
remember.
I'm up a creek.
So Tom, you've shot a lot of different subjects over the years. You've done architectural, landscape, food. Is there like a genre or a subject matter that you love shooting the most or have as a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the travel stuff is so fun. I mean, it's like getting to go places on someone else's dime doesn't hurt. But yeah, I love shooting travel stuff. But that, a close second, if not the older I get, where it's nicer to be home and realize that your kids are, almost out the door. And you want to spend as much time with them as possible, is architecture, homes. There's something just, where you just get to be a classic photographer of just like composition, lighting, exposure. There's a little less, I don't want to say there's less creativity, but it's a little more straightforward. That said, I also have been thinking lately of just not wanting, just because I've been doing something for 25 years, of not getting caught in the trap of just thinking that you know it all and that can't expand and do something different. And it is, I think going back to technology, I mean, that's photography has just it's always been technology, right? From the first cameras and daguerreotypes and, metal plates, silver plated copper plates, being coated with mercury vapors up through, what we're doing now. It's just always been like this evolution of technology that if you're not adapting, and learning to use it, I think you're doing potentially yourself a disservice. I think that said, there are a bunch of photographers who have remained old school and just shoot film and probably not doing commercial work as much, but I mean, more power to them. I think that's awesome. And I love seeing, the younger generation get hooked onto film, because there is something nice and tangible about having this object that's not a bunch of zeros and ones, right? Like, even if it's, they're making prints or they're storing negatives or transparencies in a file folder, it's like, at least there is a tangible result that right now, if, not everything I've ever shot is in the cloud. So, it's on a bunch of drives that I try to, be very, very, up to making sure everything's backed up. But there's something a little scary. My wife is a ceramicist, and sometimes I feel like, wow, this pot that you made, that this could be found in an archaeological dig 1,000 years from now. These hard drives are not going to be around in 1,000 years.
No, that's
So
true. That's true.
So
Nothing
there's
lasts
something
forever.
slightly sad
That's
about that.
so depressing now that you say that,
I
because
know.
everything I've ever created in life has been digital.
Bunch of zeros and
I
ones.
have some
True.
printouts of like early work, like, but it's like they're lame now. I've looked at them recently. I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I keeping this? This is
There is
terrible.
the what's that Internet Archive? There's like a
The
push.
Wayback
There's
Machine.
the Wayback Machine, maybe. Yeah. There's this. I think it's like the Internet Archive group or something that runs that and like
Yeah, yeah.
try and keep all the things that have ever been online alive so that they don't just disappear into the ether, which is an
Right.
admirable, goal. I do wonder sometimes, everything is transitory. There's nothing that lasts forever. One day, all those pots will disintegrate and all the
No, it's
hard
true.
drives will fall apart and rust and
Yeah.
be gone.
And there is the part of, the part of being human is just, the part of just, yeah, being able to let go, which is one of the hardest things to do, apparently,
Yeah.
my therapist tells me.
Let go and enjoy it while the ride lasts because nothing's
Yeah.
forever, you know?
Nope.
So, Tom, what would you do? I guess speaking of like photography and your early work and seeing younger photographers get back into it, would you get back into the film if you had no Sunset Magazine to shoot with? If you won the lottery tomorrow, would you go out and buy a film camera?
It's funny. I actually have been shooting film recently. I have a little Contax 35 millimeter film camera with interchangeable lenses. And when the fires went down in the Palisades and Altadena down in Southern California, we were we covered a lot in the current issue of Sunset, which if you haven't seen it, is I
Beautiful,
think a
yeah,
pretty amazing issue. But I actually took the film camera on these shoots to photograph, like the Red Cross people handing out water and in Altadena, and just as I don't know what inspired me to do it other than maybe it was that like they've
tangibleness.
just lost all this stuff. Yeah, just having this tangibleness. Because driving around these neighborhoods when I went up into Pasadena to photograph this gentleman, Sam Lagana, awesome man who stayed to fight the fires, try and save as many houses as he could. His house survived, kind of not survived. But just driving around, he's the voice of the Rams down in LA. But we drove around and it was kind of numbing just seeing block after block after block, miles of just complete and utter devastation, and just seeing, I think what was like miles, just it just I felt like I'm walking in Berlin 1945. I feel like I'm just, this
Yeah,
is so completely surreal. And then seeing, walking past, photographing, and seeing people's like personal items, vaguely recognizable in these, charred remains of these houses. And, speaking of letting go, it's like everything is gone. What do you do when everything is gone, including, so how important is, if we lose our work, our, photography, our designs, our graphics, or whatever, but you still have your life. It's that kind of put it a little bit into perspective for me. Was
yeah.
like,
I mean, did it take you back at all to the San Francisco earthquake of 1908 that you shot for Sunset?
yeah, when I was walking around with my 4x5 in
Sorry, I
1906, and
couldn't I had to lighten the mood with a
Hey, I thought you were
old
gonna
yeah,
Tom
sorry,
story
say
joke.
89, but man, you went way back instead.
yeah,
Oh, it went all the
right,
way back.
just bypassed it,
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so if you haven't seen the current issue of Sunset, it was we put a lot of work into. I don't want to say trying to emulate the Earth special earthquake issue that Sunset did back in 1906, but definitely as an inspiration for, I think maybe a big, problem with the amount of content that's out there, whether it's, for what we do, for if it's entertainment or it's news or it's, whatever, everyone's just on to the next news cycle like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
What, there was a fire in LA? Really? There's, oh, there was an earthquake in, Haiti. Oh, there was a flood in Florida. It's like you're just on to the next thing. So I think the thing that I love about Sunset is that we're still in print. I think that's really important. And I think it's like you know, yes, great, you can do a website, we can have whatever, but those can be changed and manipulated after the fact, images swapped out. I think there's something that I really love about working on something that's like, here it is.
Yeah.
It's, this is it.
Archival.
This is the culmination.
It's
Yeah.
history. It's capturing that moment.
It's history. It is. It absolutely is history, which
I
Sunset
mean,
has, that's what it does.
yeah. And when I was there, it's it's a fairly moving experience. Had the privilege of like being able to go back into the archives for our, I think it was the 150th anniversary of Sunset, or 125 or 120. I don't know.
Probably 125.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's what it was. Yeah.
120 maybe. Yeah.
Went through all the archives and pulled covers to photograph in like one big spread, and it's amazing to see the history of that magazine in one place and just like experience it. It's like standing in,
We had in the old Menlo Park campus, which was this amazing Cliff May property down in Menlo Park that's still standing and is actually up for being placed on the National Historic Registry. The meeting is actually today in Sacramento. Apparently, they had a record number of letters written in support of putting it on the National Historic Registry. But we had a room in there that had every single issue going back to 1898. And it was this small little room, very cozy, with like a club chair and a nice lamp and everything. They were all in binders, so very well taken care of. And my wife would just love every time she would come to the campus, just go into that room. You could just go into that room, close the door, just be in this cozy, just look through the issues. Like you said, it's just like this amazing amount of history. And I have to say, one thing that we've done recently that I'm not sure if it's common knowledge or if people know in the outside world yet, but we've had the entire content of Sunset digitized.
Yeah.
So we had this company, I think they were in Sweden or something, but every single issue, SIP, most of the books we could get a hold of, everything has all been digitized and it's all keyword searchable. And I think at some point it'll be put, just say if you do a subscription, you can add X number of dollars to have access to this whole online searchable, downloadable archive of material, which I think is pretty amazing. Or you can go to the Stanford Library and check that out too. But
yeah, luckily a lot of that has been saved for the history books.
Speaking of history and historical records, one of the things we're kind of grappling with is this kind of a philosophical question. So what happens when AI generated images enter the historical record? Are we going to be able to tell the difference between what was generated and what's not? Because you could easily today create a reproduction of a historical event with AI, compare it to the actual photo, and it will look very similar, probably a little more high res. Or you could just create something completely fictitious that didn't ever happen. And,
for sure.
And in 100 years, you look back and you're like, well, which one was the real event?
I mean, not even 100. Talk about a year from now, like the speed at which conspiracy theories moves. You get a photo out there of somebody standing on the grassy knoll behind Kennedy, and it's AI generated. But how soon until that's like in the zeitgeist? Might be more of somebody's like, no, that's just the man trying to tell you that it's AI generated. Actually, it was a real photograph that they tried to hide.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be quick.
That is scary. I don't know what the technology, I do know that some cameras now, I think Sony has a system to where it embeds into the file the actual metadata that, this is an actual picture, non-manipulated. That said, I'm sure you guys have all scrolled through Instagram and the number of AI generated reels is like mind-boggling. But what is even scarier, speaking of conspiracy theories, is seeing the comments. Like I saw this one where I think it was like a great white shark laying on its back with barnacles on it, and these people were all pulling the barnacles off it to help it. And there were so many comments. Oh my God, that's so amazing! They're helping that poor shark. I can't, and it was like. And you could see like people would sprout like another arm as they're doing it. And that part is scary. It is. I mean, I don't know what the answer is.
I think that's a social media issue though, because I've seen like clips of Grand Theft Auto 5 car crash and someone's like, where did that happen?
It's true.
Right.
That's GTA. Come on.
It's definitely kind of always been there, but I mean, Rocky, you just sent me something the other day that was produced by an agency, and I was reading through it, and they did a with Reddit did a big poll of like literacy among just the common public of AI and how to, if you're not in this industry, if you're not like working with it, you don't recognize when it's out there. So there's definitely a big drop off in terms of people being able to recognize what's AI and what's real and how to
For
tell the
sure.
difference. It's tough.
For sure. When does, like what percentage of AI does it have to be to be sort of not considered an original photograph anymore? Like how much manipulation is okay,
It's a very good question.
Yeah, 5%, 10%? Is it, do we just, if you AI generated, a prop in a shoot, do you need to call that out? I don't know.
Yeah,
But and I think yeah, it definitely moves into some ethics for I know, for people like National Geographic or, where it's like, look, you're doing, the World Wildlife Photo Competition. It's like
has to be in the
no
world.
Has to be
manipulation,
legit.
yeah, New York Times has no manipulation. So, but the cat's out of the bag now within so many other places that, and it
Yeah.
is becoming more and more accepted, and on the flip side, it seems to really anger a lot of people. And I see a lot of angry graphic designers like out there.
Well,
Yeah.
it,
God, I'm still just taken aback at how quickly it's come from for our jobs. And I just 10 years ago, I if you would have told me, I would have been like, no, it'll never touch creative. It'll the accountants and the professional
lawyers and
bean
stuff
counters and
and
lawyers
doctors. It's actually
Yeah,
affecting many industries. I think
for
graphic
sure.
designers are on the front lines though,
I just
because
never would have thought it would affect us as much as it has. Like
but
it came for our jobs
right.
first.
on the other hand though, it's like you think about like almost everybody can drive a car, right? But if you put somebody in a F1 car and drop them in Laguna Seca, like they're not going to be able to drive that
Mm,
car, right? So it's a
Exactly.
little. I think there's nuances that we're forgetting. We're trying to make it an apples to apples comparison when you still have to have skills. It's the same with photography. Just because everyone has a phone or a camera in their pocket now doesn't make everybody a photographer. We touched on that a little bit last week. You still have to understand composition. You have to understand lighting. There's still a whole host of other things you have to do. So it's not totally the same. Although there's probably going to be tools to help bridge that gap a little bit from the kind of that knowledge and skills gap
Absolutely.
to being able to produce stuff that's really professional. We shall
I mean,
see.
look, when samplers were invented in the music industry, orchestras basically tried to get them shut down
Hmm.
because, all of a sudden you have this little box that can play violins. And so
hmm
orchestras were like, well, no, we're, this cannot take our jobs. They didn't really take their jobs. I mean, I think for, the film industry, it's like all of a sudden a lot of guys didn't have to hire full orchestras to do, you know,
Or movie
scores,
scores, yeah.
but the guys who are really good are still doing
Absolutely.
scores and still hiring string orchestras. When drum machines came out in the 80s, drummers were, this is not real. This is, and it's like so
Still
I
drummers.
think there's still drummers. There's still electronic music. There's still rock music. So I think everything sort of like finds its place eventually. And I think right now we're in this sort of like tumultuous just
Hmm.
maelstrom of like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
What is next? And every day it's something different. I don't know. I just feel like the more the better off you are. And it doesn't matter if you hate it, love it. At least, my brother's he's a videographer full time, and same thing.
Hmm.
It's hitting his industry too. I mean, I think it's a little bit slower, but I just had a client show me the other day a video that he made for his company as a little PR thing, completely in AI, and it looked amazing.
Hmm.
That said, he's been a graphic designer for, 35, 40 years. He's really good. So he learned how to
Yeah.
use the tools
Yeah.
really well. You can take someone who's just doing it for 5 minutes and it's just going to be complete and utter garbage. To just, it's here. So if you're going to dismiss it and not at least stay in touch with what it can do, then you're not going to recognize what it can do when it's happening. So,
Right.
yeah.
Fair. Yeah. The thing I keep trying to think is this the same shift that's always happened? Is it the drum machine? Is it the invention of the camera? Is it the, you know, invention of photography?
Sure.
Or is it
Yeah.
something else?
A
I
lot
don't
of
know.
pissed off painters when that happened.
We've talked about that on the show. It's like
We did,
this is as old as time. I'm sure
We're screwed. Yeah.
cave painters we were talking about earlier, Rocky, they're probably
Right.
pissed off when somebody came along with a canvas and they were like, "You got to have a cave to be a real painter." You know,
Right.
there was
That's
probably
right.
somebody back
Yeah.
in caveman times.
Yeah. Portable art. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of technology, it's like, was that a theme in painting? I was thinking when you were talking about cameras changing so much and mirrorless technology and everything, I was thinking about those Renaissance painters probably being like, just got these new brushes, man. They got goat hair, Moroccan goat hair. Great. You should see it. Did I just have a bubble pop
No,
up on my
yeah.
video?
You
Sorry.
did. You had a
You did the
gesture.
thumbs up.
I guess
Yeah.
I did. Stupid
I got a thumbs up.
reactions. Sorry. Threw us off.
I'm not editing that out.
No, leave it in there.
Not worth
I
it.
turned it off. Speaking of technology, this is like, come on. We
I
don't
know.
want
Here
this
we are.
in our podcast.
Yeah. Who needs to drive 2 hours to go sit in a room together? This is amazing.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. Nothing is all but good or all bad. It's all progressing forward certain things, but then like setting us back. Like, would it be better if we were in a room together and more casual and more fun? Maybe. Maybe
Yeah.
we could have a beer. It'd be nice.
Yep.
That is
But
I'll
true.
go grab 3 right now.
Yeah.
there you go. Now, as soon as you can push those through the camera into our hands,
Exactly.
that'll
Once we have
be when
teleportation,
that'd be
awesome.
great. Yeah.
Sign me up.
Well, this
Tom,
could have easily been a 2-hour show, I think.
yeah, I was gonna say we
So
could sit
many more
here.
topics.
I know we have
You
so
guys
many
have
more
a nice talk
questions.
beforehand.
We did have a nice talk beforehand. I don't remember anything we talked about because I'm so sleep deprived. I got to be honest, but we had a good talk.
Is it the kids?
Yeah, my daughter was. I was telling Rocky, she's woke up like 4 times in the middle of the night, just not wanting to sleep. And Rocky did the same thing to himself. So
I did the same thing to myself I didn't get up. I was just couldn't sleep. I was restless. I had so many thoughts on my mind and I grabbed my phone, which was a mistake.
That'll set you back for sure.
Yeah, that was a huge
I
setback.
woke up at 4:30 with the kids, getting them out the door, the band on the road. I think when, my wife and I are both in our 50s, and I think they say whoever says that they didn't sleep well first wins.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's just kind of,
that's
It's
the
a constant topic. Yeah.
yep.
I do want to ask before we let you go, Tom. I do want to ask. Rocky has this great series of questions on here, and I am interested in this particular one, Rocky. You were asking, or you have written here, like, do you feel like you have a signature style? Because that's one thing I feel like a lot of photographers and artists and designers we all talk about how you have to develop that, like, what makes you different, what gives you that differentiator, what's your style. Do you feel like you have a personal style, and if so, like, how has it changed over the time you've been at Sunset, and like what's the course
For
of that look
sure.
like?
I think I've, for a long time, I was super into just like flary backlight. I was like, everything had to be backlit with, the sun peeking around a corner with the star flare.
Little lens flare. Yeah.
And I always thought that would be a great name if I was going to change my name. It would be Flary Backlight, but didn't happen. But,
We can still do
I feel
it.
like
Not too
I
late.
learned early on that kind of trying to change a look, like to not get locked down into any one look for me personally, changing it up every 6 months, a year. That said, it is painful to look back. It's sort of like the early days of, when filters came out for your camera phone and everyone was doing all these filters. I think there was an Onion article years ago where it was like, now there's this, program that'll restore your, vintage digital, filtered photographs back to the original, which I thought was pretty funny. But
Take the
I
cat
definitely
ears
look
off.
at some of, exactly. I look at some of the processing, where it's like, you gave it like a Polaroid look on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, I mean, at the same time, that's kind of a record of the times that you were in. So yeah, I try to, I try to just mix it up a little bit to not feel like, again, I'm just doing the same thing over and over. And I think, a big part of that is, again, just, knowing your equipment and what's changing. And, cameras now have dynamic range that they did not have 20 years ago,
It's a fair point.
15 years ago. So the look, just sort of due to the nature of the technology is changing.
Yeah.
What our eye sees and what the camera can resolve, unless you're shooting, crazy HDR and, the dynamic range in a single image, it's, there's always been ways to sort of, with graduated filters and polarizers and all that stuff to sort of bring it within the range of, whether it's for print or for there's always been tools to do that.
Right.
And it comes back to like, just because you can, should you? And I think that's a trap I'm trying always not to fall into, of like just making, when you would shoot film, that was it. You got, they would get scanned to be separated for print, but there wasn't a lot of retouching. And I think that is what I'm trying to like make sure that I'm very aware of when I'm editing my images, is it's like, there's a telephone pole in that shot. So what? There's a telephone pole in the shot.
Gives it more authenticity.
When you're cleaning things up to where it's one thing if it's for an advertising, shot or whatever, fine. But for editorial, it's like how much is too much? Like, just, leave it alone.
Sure.
Stop playing with it. So.
What your mom said. Sorry. Awesome. Well, as with every show, Tom, I want to leave on one of the my favorite interview questions from the master himself, Mr. James Lipton, of Inside the Actor Studio, the greatest interviewer of all time, in my opinion. I'm gonna hit you with one of his famous final questions. This one for you on your 25 years of your amazing career at Sunset. I want to ask, what profession other than your own would you have most liked to try? What profession would you absolutely want to do if you weren't a photographer?
Yeah, I gotta say, when I was in high school, I was a tenor sax player, and I toured with the all European jazz ensembles. This was in '85 to '88.
Wow.
And I still to this day feel like, oh man, I could have gone down the road of being a full-time jazz musician. And
you still
they're
play?
definitely, I don't. Nope. I stupidly sold my sax sometime in the 90s. I play music. I do some like electronic ambient stuff, just sort of more for getting out of my head. Again, that's like pushing around a lot of zeros and ones. And I think people who learn how to play a musical instrument, I think that's really important. Like guitar, ukulele. My wife plays ukulele. Just, I think something connecting, you physically with an instrument is really important. So yeah, I don't know. I could have been standing on a street corner with my sax for, chump change. And
hey, let AI go on that next shoot. Let AI go on that next shoot. You just generate those images and take the time to go and pick the sax back up. That's what I say. Use it.
I think I'll do that.
Use it to your advantage.
I will. Awesome.
Wonderful talking to you, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks for
guys
joining us.
Too. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Really appreciate
See you next
it.
time.
Bye.